Here is yet another possible explanation to this age-old philosophical and metaphysical question. Is consciousness inside the brain, or is the brain inside of consciousness? If you have some experience with these kinds of questions and all the possible explanations, then you will probably just roll your eyes and go like, oh God, not this again. Well, I'm sorry, but I just want to test myself and see what kind of explanation I can produce when I process this question into my capacity to think logically. So without further ado, let's try and get the facts right. Initially, there are a bunch of obvious reasons why we should believe that consciousness is located inside the brain. For example, we can alter someone's consciousness by stimulating certain parts of the brain. You can become more or less conscious in certain areas when specific areas and structures of the brain are stimulated or damaged. And when the brain is totally destroyed, there is no sign of consciousness at all. So consciousness is only possible when the body is alive and functioning. Wow, you must be kidding me! You don't even need a brain to acknowledge that simple fact. I know. But we have to start simple, because this video will only get more and more complicated. So, when is the body alive? When the heart beats, when the blood flows, when your lungs are breathing, when your organs are processing whatever it has to process, when sensory organs are sending signals to the brain, where you happen to become aware of them. In other words, you can only be conscious when everything inside your body is moving and flowing, basically. And when everything stops moving and flowing, you will lose all of consciousness. At least that's how we observe it with other beings. Becoming conscious of your own unconsciousness is an absolute contradiction. There is no way when you are fully unconscious that you can tell yourself, oh, I'm unconscious. No way. We just call it a state of unconsciousness when we see a dead body. But when you are actually dead, there is just no way that you can prove for yourself that you are unconscious, nor can you prove that you are conscious. So this state of being actually dead, like actually being completely dead as you can be, just like before you were born, totally non-existent. This state is neither a conscious nor an unconscious state. And this is where non-duality kicks in again. But many people just refuse to understand this. They always want to cling to one side of the duality because the concept conscious is comprehensible and the concept unconscious is comprehensible. Yet in reality, death itself is neither conscious nor unconscious. Because unconsciousness is a term produced by consciousness. And consciousness can only refer to conscious concepts, such as unconsciousness. Unconsciousness is a form of conceptualized consciousness. And it is trying to refer to itself as the absence of itself, which means that it is trying to refer to absolutely nothing. But a concept can only refer to something, namely the idea of nothing, which is still something. It can never refer to actual nothingness. So please understand, for Christ's sake, that this is a fundamental paradox. Unconsciousness is, in reality, neither conscious nor unconscious. Okay? So now we can delete the concept of unconsciousness and we can enter the next level of understanding. If we suggest that consciousness is inside the brain, then everything outside the brain must be unconsciousness, right? So everything besides all the beings which have some form of consciousness is considered to be totally unconscious. Like a rock, like a spoon, like a cloud, like empty space, etc. That's how we conceptualize it. But in reality, unconsciousness is non-dualistic. So everything which is considered to be unconscious in the universe is in reality neither conscious nor unconscious. So when you're looking at a spoon, that spoon in and of itself is neither conscious nor unconscious. But only when you claim that that spoon exists outside of your brain, outside of consciousness. Okay? You are conscious of the spoon. You can perceive it. You can think about it. You are aware of it. But when you claim that that spoon exists outside of your consciousness, the spoon becomes non-dualistic. So everything outside of consciousness is neither conscious nor unconscious. This is a very radical point that I want to make clear. And I'm saying this with a lot of emphasis because this is one hell of a colossal truth statement that 99% of the population is incapable of understanding. Unconsciousness is a paradoxical concept and is totally meaningless. Conclusion: consciousness has no opposite. And since it has no opposite, consciousness itself is also non-dualistic. Because there is no dualistic contrast. Consciousness can't be compared to anything else. It's not different from anything else. You can't distinguish it as something that you can perceive. You can't say, aha, that thing right there is consciousness and that thing right there is not consciousness. If a thing is not consciousness, it's non-dualistic, and therefore consciousness itself cannot be separated from anything else, including all of your thoughts. Otherwise it would be dualistic, but it's not. Not a single thought or theory can point to consciousness and say, aha, I have found consciousness. So is the brain inside consciousness? This question once again suggests that consciousness exists as an independent thing that somehow we are able to perceive. Consciousness has no opposite. There is nothing on the other side of consciousness. Everything in the universe that we can perceive has a front and a back side. Every object has a front and back side. If it only had one side, the object could not exist, because that would imply that the object can't have a certain amount of thickness. Whatever lies in between the front and back side of an object is considered to be the totality, the whole of the object. But if there is only one side of the object, then the object would be infinitely thin, and the object would basically disappear. So you have to imagine an object with no thickness or depth, because it only has one side. Just try to imagine it. Can you do that? Well, I can't. It basically becomes two-dimensional, and when you try to look at it from the side, sideways, it would disappear. Also bear in mind that you are looking at the front and back side simultaneously, because they are exactly the same. This non-dual side is the front and back side at the same time, without an opposite. But yeah, nothing in existence is two-dimensional. Everything that you can perceive has a depth to it. So, I mean, it contains a volume with XYZ dimensions. So without the third dimension, you get squeezed into a non-dual surface that has no thickness at all. Now, is it possible for a non-dual surface to exist? Well, this is a meaningless question, because The answer is non-dual. You expect a dual answer, you expect a two-sided answer. It either exists or it doesn't. But we're talking about a non-dual answer in which the two-sided dual answer is squeezed into one non-dual surface, such that the answer it exists and the answer it does not exist will collapse into a singular thing. The front and back side will become exactly the same without a difference. So the answer to the question, does this non-dual surface exist? Yes and no. There is no difference between existing and non-existing. And this is what consciousness is. It is a non-dual surface in which consciousness and unconsciousness collapse into a singular thing, such that both consciousness and unconsciousness are actually the exact same thing. There is no difference between them. So this is how I would define consciousness for now. Consciousness is a two-dimensional surface in which the front and back side of this surface melt together, because theoretically a two-dimensional surface can't have two sides. Otherwise it would be three-dimensional. And that's why the implications of a two-dimensional surface are always paradoxical, because it's a non-dual surface, and we are only able to know and comprehend a three-dimensional world where everything has two sides. In other words, a dualistic world where everything has an opposite, including the way our thinking works. According to our understanding, everything is either a yes or a no. It's true or it's false. It's right or it's wrong. It exists or it does not exist. It's big or it's small. It's up or it's down. It's good or it's bad. It's above or it's below. It's happy or it's sad. It's alive or it's dead, etc. That's how we think. And the problem is that we want to apply this dualistic thinking mechanism to the non-dualistic nature of consciousness and of reality. Now, so to get back to the initial question, is consciousness inside the brain or is the brain inside consciousness? Well, it doesn't matter. When we want to apply a dualistic logic to the non-dualistic nature of consciousness, then inside and outside become meaningless. Consciousness is not inside of anything, nor is it outside of anything. There is no inside nor outside. Consciousness is not in the brain, nor is the brain inside consciousness. So where is it then? No, that's a meaningless question, because the question is proposed from within the dualistic mechanism of thinking, and it expects one side of the dualistic answer, but the two sides of the answer are squeezed and molten together into a two-dimensional surface with only one side, such that there is no difference between the dualistic answers. There is no difference between consciousness being inside or outside the brain. There is no difference between this is consciousness and this is not consciousness. There is no difference between consciousness works in this way and consciousness does not work in this way. There is no difference between consciousness exists or doesn't exist. There is no bloody difference. You can't split apart consciousness and turn it into a dualistic phenomenon. Alright, that's it. I've been repeating the same argument in dozens of different ways. It really should make sense by now. But if you still disagree, and you still think that consciousness is a perceivable or detectable phenomenon in the brain, go ahead and please me with new information. Enlighten me, please. Thanks for listening.